Normally you'd pull into port, every 30 days or so. But because Trump has entered into this war in Iran without a strategy, without really, I think, understanding any of the military dynamics, has a Secretary of Defense in Pete Hegseth who's fired really the expertise, the kind of top tier expertise that we had in the military, and is operating, as I sometimes say, as if he's in some Marvel comic book super soldier plan, as opposed to actually the strategy for implementing battle rhythms and operational movements. Seems to not really understand any of this. So we have a carrier at sea that hasn't pulled into port this year at all.
This is extraordinary. That is New Jersey's Governor Mikey Sherrill. She's a former naval officer expressing her outrage today of the Trump administration's blatant incompetence, inexperience, and indifference that has led to an extended deployment and horrific living conditions for United States service members in Donald Trump's seemingly endless war with Iran. Plans are finally in place for a new aircraft carrier to relieve the USS Lincoln after 9 months at sea. That is a modern-day record. Our colleague Priya Sridhar reports that the Trump administration's last-minute scramble still leaves uncertainty for the roughly 1,000 sailors on board the carrier group's 3 destroyer ships who have been at sea just as long. According to one sailor, the crew on those ships have, quote, endured shortages of food and supplies, plumbing failures, and equipment that broke down and proved difficult to repair at sea. Morale, the sailor said, is, quote, abysmal. Most of my command is just holding on by a thread. We have no other option but to just do our job till we can go home. I want to bring in our Pentagon reporter, Priya Sridhar, who's been breaking story after story on the Lincoln for us. She's also a former officer in the Navy. Director Brennan is still with us. I want to ask you something that might be sensitive, but now that this story is getting so much attention, are your sources increasingly afraid to tell you what's really happening?
Well, Nicole, they're definitely getting pushback from their chain of command who is telling them not to speak to the media. And I think they're also seeing a lot of the discourse on social media where, sadly, people are attacking service members and calling them weak. And we're seeing even some of the political appointees who are in charge of the military sort of spewing the same sort of rhetoric. So I think in some cases they were regretful at first for speaking to me because they were being slammed by some people on the internet. But now most of the sailors on the Lincoln are obviously happy about the outcome here because prior to all of this reporting, they really felt as though they were forgotten at sea. And that's essentially the case with these 3 destroyers, as you mentioned, who have been charged with protecting this carrier. They have been on this deployment for the same amount of time as the Lincoln, and they've been dealing with the exact same problems as a result of this deployment getting repeatedly extended because what was supposed to just be a few weeks mission with this war in Iran has now been extended on indefinitely. So while I have been talking to a lot of people surrounding these 3 destroyers, along with my colleague Lindsay Papia, the problem, Nicole, with trying to report on all of this is that each of the destroyers only has between 300 and 330 people. So they were very afraid to go on background with me because they thought that since it's a smaller group of people, perhaps they would be more easily identifiable. But at the same time, to watch the Lincoln potentially float away and get to come home and then to be left behind facing the exact same conditions has been so heartbreaking for them. And so that's ultimately what allowed us to get at least this one sailor to go on background with us, which is allowing us to talk about these destroyers, which I think we really should be talking about.
Director Brennan, I feel like we have a conversation pretty regularly about how broken the Congress is, that they are intended to be a co-equal branch of government, regardless of whether the president's party is in control or not. It certainly worked that way during the 8 years that that George W. Bush was president. Republicans were some of the loudest critics, John McCain among them, and many others of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But we don't often see the human consequence, right, of that breakdown. This young sailor jumping overboard and the kind of climate being carried out and the attention and the energy being on how that story got out, not on how to fix the suffering of the men and women of the military, is to me why those stories matter, and the human consequence of the Congress just leaving the playing field, of Republicans taking themselves off the game board and going home so that they don't make Donald Trump mad. You have men jumping off the USS Lincoln.
Absolutely, Nicole. And at a time when the White House and the executive branch is not doing a good job of even briefing the Congress, the reporting done by Priya and her colleagues is especially important because it's exposing the incompetence, the callousness, the recklessness of the Trump administration. And were it not for such reporting, these issues would go unaddressed. And so it's clear that this now is stimulating quite a bit of attention and hopefully some changes. But, every family member of every serviceman and woman should be outraged at what is happening to their sons and daughters, spouses, brothers, sisters, whomever, because what we've seen right now in the USS Lincoln, as well as those destroyers, is, again, it reflects the lack of planning, the lack of competent leadership, the lack of thoughtfulness in terms of what it is we're going to do as we're in what seems, as you said, like a never-ending war. And also the concern I have is Russia and China, Putin and Xi Jinping are looking now at the United States military, seeing that a lot of our inventory of some of the advanced missile systems and weapon systems are being exhausted. But also, we can't run a war. We can't organize ourselves militarily in order to take care of the problem in the Persian Gulf. What might Xi Jinping and Putin be looking at and considering in terms of, is this a time, in fact, of weakness of the U.S. military because of a lack of leadership, because of a lack of competence on the part of senior leadership in the Pentagon, Hegseth and others? And so how might they take advantage of that to move in some way that's going to advance their national security interests and decrease ours?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point, and it is taking away the one thing that they've had, right? They've been able to say, well, we might not have a strategy for winning, ending, or articulating our goals for the war in Iran, but the military is brilliant, and no one could deny that. And the men and women certainly are, but it's not being run brilliantly. And I wonder, Priya, what you make of how that lands inside the military.
Yeah, well, I want to also point out exactly why it is likely that not all three of these destroyers are going to be going home with the Lincoln, because I think this is a really important point. We know that the USS George Washington, the aircraft carrier that's home ported in Yokosuka, Japan, is moving towards the Middle East. But according to the U.S. Naval Institute, which tracks all of the Navy's 300 vessels, it's only moving with 2 destroyers and not 3. And here's the reason why, Nicole. That third destroyer, the USS Benfold, actually lost power in the South China Sea at the end of July, which resulted in the 300 sailors on board that vessel had no air conditioning, no toilets, no showers, no hot food for 4 days. And so that destroyer got redirected to the Philippines for maintenance and repair for an indefinite amount of time. And it's unclear at this point how long it's going to take to fix that destroyer and whether or not it will get reunited with the George Washington eventually. But that's the reason that likely one of these 3 destroyers that's with the Lincoln is going to have to stay there. And I think it goes back to the original point. These are not chess pieces. You can't just move things around. There is a domino effect here. It's not just impacting the sailors and the morale. It's all of our military assets, and we're wearing them into the ground. And, as was just pointed out, Beijing is watching all of this very closely, as is North Korea and Moscow.